All right, guys, it's time for another Friday Roundtable Extravaganza. I still am Dave Rubin. This is the Rubin Report, and joining me today are two of my favorite Floridians. First up, New York Post columnist Carol Markowicz. And secondly, although I guess this is in no order, John, you can probably push back if you'd like to have gone first, make a case. Former NYPD officer and political commentator John Cardillo. Guys, how are you?
Awesome,
Hi.
Dave.
So nice to be on.
John, I did ladies first there, but do you want to have the first comment about life or anything?
Absolutely not. Hand it over to my sister, Carol.
It is freezing in Florida. I
It's-
just want to know we suffer too, okay? It's like 55 degrees out there. I'm in a sweater. It's unpleasant. I did
Wow.
not sign up for this.
Wow, Carol Markowicz working blue out of nowhere because I don't think we have any right to complain about weather in light of what's going on in the country. But yes, there is some weird thing. I've been thinking about it all week. It's been as cold as it's ever been since I've been in Florida in the 40s. Having lived in LA before this, obviously I fled LA where it's just an absolute disaster right now. Of course, we're going to talk a bit about that. We're going to talk also a bit about something that seems like it's way in the past already, but it's only about a week ago, which was the New Orleans terrorist attack. I think it's worth refreshing some of what's going on with that subsequently, and then some sort of fun stuff as it relates to Trump and possibly taking over Canada and Greenland and the Panama Canal and a bunch more. I do want to start with one clip from Stephen A. Smith's podcast. I had Stephen A. in this week. We're going to post the interview tomorrow. But a couple days ago, he had Bill Maher on his show. And everyone knows I've been talking about this wide tent thing forever. And what do we do with the sane liberals? And can they put up the fight with the crazies on their side? And can we now welcome them in on our side of things? And they got into it. And I'd love to get your take on it.
I recently sat down with a guy by the name of Dave Rubin. I'm sure you are aware of who he is.
Yeah, I know Dave. I went to a Laker game with him.
That's right. He bragged about going to the Lakers game with you. I told him you and I went to a Lakers game together.
Yes, we did.
As well recently. He and I just finished talking. And one of the things that I called him, I said, listen, he's not a lieutenant or general or whatever, but let's say he is, meaning Bill Maher, consider me a soldier because I stand directly behind him in support of all the things that he has said, particularly over the last several years about the left and how the left pretty much lost its way. Getting personal with you for a second, how difficult, if difficult at all, has it been for you to deal with some of the things that have been thrown in your direction just because you were on your show telling the truth about what the left did wrong and how it got in its own way and what it needed to do to fix the party? Your thoughts?
You know, Stephen A., you can't have everything. That's what you come to if you live long enough. The things that people say to me, I've been out with every type of celebrity. They don't say the things they say to me to other celebrities. That means more to me than anything. But things that people say to me and how much it means to them that they feel like there's somebody out there who is never pulling a punch and who will just call out anybody wherever they are in the political spectrum if he thinks they're saying something goofy, that really means the world to me.
So the reason I wanted to show that clip is I guess everyone should just go to Laker games together and maybe we could work this stuff out. I met James Worthy. That was pretty cool.
Knicks.
Yeah. Or Knicks. We have 3 former New Yorkers on the show, now all Floridians as well. But the reason I wanted to show that clip is because both of those guys did not vote for Donald Trump. They both voted for Kamala Harris. And if people watch the interview with Stephen tomorrow, he kind of regrets it already, which I thought was quite a concession. But my question to you guys is, what should we do with these guys? To me, they're both a net positive, obviously, but they made the wrong decision. Maybe he regrets it, maybe not. But how do we hold this wide tent thing together for whatever differences we might have, Carol?
It's tough because while I want a wider tent and I want people to understand that the conservative point of view is clearly the better point of view. It's a more serious point of view. I find a lot of leftism to be very childish, and I don't think that it holds up to scrutiny as you get older. A lot of people say they have kids and they become more conservative. Well, yes, that makes a lot of sense. You become wiser, you become smarter. But the thing is, a lot of these people say, if you guys would just change all of these things, then I'd move over to your side. Well, no, I don't think that the people who have been here all along need to be changing things. I think that the people who have been wrong for so long and want to move over to the side that's been mostly right, they should be the ones changing. They should be the ones introspective. And that's the thing about, Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith. Yes, they are brighter and wiser than most of the people on the left, but they're still not doing the correct actions. And, that really disappoints me. They already regret not voting for Donald Trump. They already regret voting for Kamala. Why? What has happened other than it's become easier to say so in the last few months? The vibe shift has happened. The only thing that's happened, no policies have occurred yet, but it's become acceptable to say, I voted for Trump. And so, yeah, it's easier for them now to say, I regret voting for Kamala.
John, putting aside the political differences for a second, for the three of us as New Yorkers, we all grew up in place. I grew up in Long Island. You grew up in Queens. Karol in Brooklyn. It's like we grew up around people that were different than us. It was always that way, ethnically and economically and everything else. And to me, that's what America's about. That's why I agree, Karol, on the sort of ideological premise of you have to be careful that they don't come and usurp things or change things too much. But I'm very open to this idea, and we have to make sure it just doesn't go off the rails because I grew up with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, so did I, Dave, right? I grew up in an area, Queens, that was very mixed. My two next door neighbors, till my best friends till this day, were Jamaican and Jewish. I mean, we had white kids in the neighborhood, Hispanic kids, Asian kids. And so we lived in a post-racial society. I blame Barack Obama. Barack Obama put race relations back 100 years in this country, maybe even longer. Maybe you put them back 200 years. But that all said, I'm in agreement with Karol. Now it's easy to take the anti-Kamala, pro-Trump position because you're not going to get fired. You're not going to be canceled. You're not going to see this tremendous backlash. You're not going to be demonetized on Facebook, according to Zuck's recent statements, anymore if you decide to shift a little bit to the right.
Note there was no apology. Did you note that? He never said, I'm sorry about any of the stuff. He just said, we're changing course.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, look, the Babylon Bee hit it the best. They were like the guy who said there was never censorship on Facebook now says he's going to end censorship on Facebook. Right. I mean, it's laughable. And we know this. But the bigger problem we run into is exactly what Karol pointed out. Whenever somebody is Black or Hispanic or gay or trans or whatever it is, and they come out as conservative, we immediately embrace these people without vetting them. And then we start to shift toward them. We start to shift left to placate them. And this leftward shift, and one of the things that has infuriated me by many of the MAGA influencers is, well, no, it's a big tent, and we should move left to bring everybody in so we can win elections. Well, we're going to go to, if you're going to go to the left, I'd rather go slow, rip the Band-Aid off and die quickly than have a slow, agonizing, torturous death. We need to bring people back to our side, not constantly placate the leftists hoping they join us.
Yeah, Karol, I want to get your take on that because I totally hear the point, John, and we talk about this all the time. My feeling is that over time, as I continue to be friends with these guys and we do each other's shows and everything else, I think it's fairly obvious they will keep coming our way. Like I believe in my thoughts and beliefs enough that you can prove it to them over time. They're certainly not dragging me that way. But Karol, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. And again, Bill Maher is sort of a unique case because he was brave during a time where it was more difficult to say so. He said things that were unacceptable to be said. And, he was asked, Stephen A. Smith asked him, like, did you get pushback? He kind of played that off like, oh, he doesn't, people credit him and they compliment him. And I'm sure that happens too. But I saw the vicious attacks that he was getting on Twitter at the time. So he really did take some serious hits for being a little bit outside of the left mainstream. So I credit some of these guys. I appreciate that they are speaking up, but for a lot of the other ones, it's become safe to do so, and it's a little weak right now.
All right. Well, as we see everything that's going on in the country right now, I think it will become more and more obvious that we're kind of, I hate the phrase, but we're like on the right side of this thing. So now let's bring this to the thing that everyone's talking about this week, obviously, which is happening right now. These crazy wildfires happening in Los Angeles that have largely destroyed the Pacific Palisades. Pasadena's going under, the Hollywood Hills. I mean, it's just unbelievable. This video, I wanted to get to it earlier in the week. It's just incredible. Our friend Adam Carolla, comedian and podcaster Adam Carolla, he a couple of years ago testified how 7 years before that he had applied, or it was even more years before that, he had applied to be a firefighter in Los Angeles and had to wait 7 years. And well, take a look.
Geez, I want to talk about my white privilege so badly.
I graduated North Hollywood High with a 1.7 GPA. I could not find a job. I walked to a fire station in North Hollywood. I was 19. I was living in the garage of my family home. My mom was on welfare and food stamps. And I said, can I get a job as a fireman? And they said, no, because you're not Black, Hispanic, or a woman. We'll see in about 7 years. And I went to a construction site and dug ditches and picked up garbage for the next 7 years. I got a letter in the mail sent to my father's house saying, your time has come to do the written exam for the LA Fire Department. I took it and I was standing in line and I had a young woman of color standing behind me in line. And I said, just out of curiosity, when did you sign up to become a fireman? Because I did it, or a person, 7 years ago. And she said, Wednesday. That is an example of my white privilege.
John, I mean, if people want to talk about why these systems are failing, that might be the most perfect example ever.
Yeah, look, it's nothing new, right? When I took the NYPD test back in the early 90s, they told us flat out, you're a white male. We're going to be taking anywhere between 1.4 and 2 points off of each, for each white male. We're going to be shaving that off of your score and distributing that out proportionally to women, people of color, et cetera. And look, when I went through the academy, we had a woman in the academy who was morbidly obese. She couldn't run around the gym once. So and it was a 1.5 mile run. It was 22 or 23 times around the gym. I'm in my early 20s. I'm doing that in my sleep. Well, this girl was about my age, but about 400 pounds at 5'5". She couldn't get around the gym. I went back to the academy 5 years later. She was still working there in her academy uniform, making the same salary as a New York City cop on the street, receiving the same benefits. This has been a problem in emergency services for years and years, but it's had catastrophic consequences in these LA fires because they promoted up these incompetent people. You know, fire is the one place where you really need to have done every job at the lowest base firefighter level to be an effective lieutenant, captain. They typically don't have sergeants in fire departments, and normally it's lieutenant, captain, chief. It's not like law enforcement where you could skate your way up because there are some people who are competent. This is you're in direct command of these men and women, and you're sending them into burning bush. You need to know what you're doing. And we saw, I mean, this is the most tragic thing I've ever seen. DEI killed people and cost potentially over $100 billion in losses.
Right. And of course, before the commenters get in there, no one is saying this is all because of DEI and all because of the hiring. And there are obviously great people at the NYPD now, and there are great people in the LA Fire Department now. But Karol, is this not like in some ways, the most perfect example as we watch one of the once great cities of America literally burn down? Is this not the most perfect example in some ways that we all, not that you wanted, but like that we could ask for in a metaphorical sense, to prove how ridiculous this all is?
Absolutely. And, you know, look, the thing is, and this is the whole problem with wokeness and cancel culture and all of that, there are things you're not allowed to say. And the thing that you're not allowed to say here is that men do better in certain jobs than women do. And I'm very I'm, you know, as pro-woman as can be, I'm a very good driver, for example. And I always take offense when you know, men talk smack about women.
Yeah. John, she's a great driver. Karol, you can drive us home from dinner next time.
Exactly right. You're driving us home from happy.
Tesla self-drives, but yes. But if John's 400-pound friend showed up to save me from my burning house, I would not appreciate that. And I think we need to be able to say, look, men do some jobs better than women do. They have better upper body strength than we do. Of course, there's going to be some small, you know, exceptions to that rule. But in general, we should aim for firefighting forces to be primarily big, strong men who could carry people on their backs out of their burning houses. I don't think there's anything crazy about saying anything like that. I don't think it's anti-woman to say anything like that. And the evidence is here. Look, it's not. Is it all DEI? Of course not. It's also terrible mismanagement. It's awful politicians. It's bad policies. It's all of that. But DEI is where we should start this, you know, search for what went wrong here.
I want to connect this to a tweet from Bernie Sanders from yesterday, because he wrote this: 80,000 people told to evacuate. Blazes 0% contained. 8 months since the area has seen rain. The scale and damage of the loss is unimaginable. Climate change is real, not a hoax. Donald Trump must treat this like the existential crisis it is. There's so much to unpack there because first off, Donald Trump's not president. We played a video with Dr. Drew yesterday of Donald Trump literally in a forest 6 years ago with Gavin Newsom talking about why Gavin needed to clear out the brush and everything else and how Gavin has gotten rid of dams and all of these things. But Drew made an interesting point that I want your take on, which is that I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on climate change, generally speaking, but if climate change is real, if it is real, well, then why didn't Gavin Newsom and, say, Joe Biden and Karen Bass and the former mayor, Eric Garcetti, why didn't they do any of the things to stop any of this from happening, putting aside DEI and everything else? Carol, I'll let you go first.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? With climate change, it's all about us all believing in this thing. And even if you believe, like, let's say Leonardo DiCaprio does, if you're then getting in your private plane or sailing away on your private, yacht, I think that you don't really want to do anything about climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Believing in this concept seems to be enough for these people. And so I've always said if Republicans wanted to an answer, they could just say, I believe in climate change. I want to keep living the way I'm living, just like you are. And then nobody does anything. Just behave the way the left does. I think the thing is that we have like a walking shrug emoji in Gavin Newsom. And what else are they going to say? California is controlled top to bottom by Democrats. They have failed on every single level. Every single, barometer of good government didn't happen here. And really, so what can they say other than climate change?
Let me read this tweet from John Gabriel because I think it gets to that point. He wrote, just 11 months ago, LA had the most rainfall in the past 25 years and several extra feet of snowpack in the Sierras. Since California is too busy destroying dams to build new reservoirs, the majority of the precipitation drained into the ocean. Newsom's Democrats own this. We played a video yesterday of Newsom talking about how proud he was to get rid of these dams so that they could have more salmon swimming upstream. I like salmon, but clearly they could use a little more water these days. John, I take it that none of this surprises you.
Now, look, I mean, I don't know what's more illegitimate, the cult of climate change or the holiday Kwanzaa. I mean, they were both invented by guys that nobody should listen to. One, Kwanzaa was
Kamala celebrates both of them.
She celebrates both. She has cards and wears her daishiki. It's awesome, right? I mean, the guy who created Kwanzaa used to torture women with soldering irons, and Saint Gore of Love Story invented climate change with that insufferable documentary 20 some odd years ago. And the fact that it has here, want to talk about climate change? How do we open the show? We're all sitting in South Florida complaining because it was in the 40s. So no, I mean, it's not a thing, okay? And we know it's not a thing. And the fact that it's always their default position, the real problem here, and I think I even put it into our group text, an LAPD sergeant I was talking to, I think he summed it up the best. This was yesterday. He said, Democrats in California treat first response and first responders like novelties. They don't take them seriously when they ask for more resources. Mm-hmm. They don't take any preparedness seriously. They don't look at worst case scenarios, analyze them and say, okay, let's be ready up to this. This should be our state of readiness. No, like you said, what did they do? They knocked down dams. They didn't fill reservoirs because of salmon and minnows and things that might happen, but really wouldn't, but sounded really, really good to the big dem donors in Hollywood, right? It's all these causes they could get behind to feel good about their own inadequacy and degeneracy, in many cases. And so I think what happened here, I'm going to take it a step further. I think when Trump comes in office, one of his first orders of business alongside Pam Bondi, when she's confirmed, is the entire state of California should be put under a DOJ review for mismanagement of funds and emergency resources. I don't think we can do anything less at this point. This is like an extinction level event for certain areas of that state. There needs to be federal review on this.
Right. And the point, again, I just really want to drive it home because I think everyone should understand, even if you 100% believe in climate change, then that's even worse in this case because they still did nothing to stop exactly what happened. I want to connect this to Elon Musk because he's kind of just the center of the universe these days. And before I throw you to this clip, I should remind everybody, Elon Musk, who lived in California, who had Tesla in California, and who was doing the Boring Company to literally build tunnels to alleviate traffic under underneath Los Angeles and brought in billions of dollars in taxes, and all of the employees and everything else eventually fled California to go to Texas because of the mismanagement of Gavin Newsom. And then Gavin Newsom literally celebrated when Elon Musk left. He was happy that he left. Well, here's Elon Musk on what's going on with the fires.
And I don't mean there's some good regulations, but there's just so much that we just can't get anything done. I mean, you take sort of the California wildfires, for example. We really need to have fire breaks, and we need to clear the brush back away from houses, and we need to make sure the reservoirs are full. These are all kind of obvious things, but due to a bunch of environmental rulings, you can't actually do that in California. So they're not allowed to do the fire breaks, and they're not allowed to push the brush back away from houses, because it might hurt some, like red-legged frog or something like that. There's like some sort of creature, usually a creature you've never heard of, that is preventing this from occurring. There's like this fish called the smelt, for example, so we have far more freshwater runoff into the ocean than we should really, and on the theory that it helps this one little fish that likes a slightly briny freshwater saltwater mix. And if we keep more fresh water, then the smelt fish will not be happy. But there's no actual evidence that the smelt fish is going to be unhappy if we keep a bit more fresh water. In fact, so we should keep more fresh water, keep the reservoirs full, and just have some sensible fire breaks and move the brush away from houses. That's just an example of like, we've saved a lot of trouble, a lot of tragedy in LA if we'd done that.
Karol, I think the point there is whether you care about the smelt fish or not. The optics, when people are seeing, wait a minute, how is Malibu, which is on the water, burning down? And then it's because of the exact type of regulations that he's talking about. He moves out. There's an unbelievable brain drain and resource drain in California. It has now strengthened the red states. And to John's point, it's like maybe once Trump's in, the feds do have to come in and be like, no more. If we're the United States, we got to do something about this.
I tweeted this on X or whatever it's called at this point. But imagine this was happening in Florida. Imagine our fire hydrants were empty and it was DeSantis walking around the state going like this. I just, I think that there would be basically like troops on our door waiting to get rid of DeSantis. It's gotten so insane that they're getting a pass for this mismanagement. Elon Musk talking about this so long ago, and Donald Trump talking about this so long ago, and all of us knew that they needed to cut down these dry, dead trees and make a better situation because they're so prone to fires. It's scary that they didn't do that because of, possibly some fish or some environmental issue that they had a problem with. I'm afraid for the future in places like this. I'm actually a lover of California. I loved LA before it was really destroyed. I love California, the state. It's so beautiful. The fact that they have managed to bring this state to its knees, and yet Gavin Newsom is still considered presidential material. He's still up in the running for 28. I think all of that is crazy. And I would love to see again, going back to these leftists who are opening their eyes, I'd love to see them take this lesson and really apply it moving forward and say we can no longer live by these leftist policies because look what happens.
Right. That's a great point. And next time I talk to Maher, hopefully on camera, I'll bring that up because he wanted Newsom to run for president and was talking about how much he liked him. So it's like, okay, the rubber's met the road. You live in the hills. Like, may not be that thrilled at the moment. I want to read this tweet from Chamath Palihapitiya from the All In podcast, who made a good point about now some of the cascading issues we're going to see. He wrote, the aftermath of the California wildfires will be important for the entire country. Number one, private insurance companies have dropped fire protection from many homeowners' policies or made the rates so high as to be unreasonable for most. They will fight tooth and nail to not pay. How do we fix the insurance market going forward? We can't expect 20 million people just to move. Two, California set up their own program with lower premiums, but potentially low coverage limits for many of the homes already destroyed. Where will this money come from? The state is running enormous deficits. 3, government bureaucrats will have to answer for inadequate fire prevention procedures. What exactly changed after this exact thing happened a few years ago? Number 4, after January 20th, President Trump will have a decision. Step in and help homeowners, may also potentially take Governor Newsom off the hook, stay on the sidelines, and it may accelerate a recall and tip California to swing Republican. Number 5, inadequate emergency resource personnel was on display as everyone from government officials to private homeowners took to X asking for help. Hopefully, this personnel inadequacy didn't come from hiring quotas. How will we find out? When calamities like this happen, they tend to make bare everything that led to it. This needs to be documented and then fixed. John, that gets to your earlier point. I mean, it's a little bit of everything, right? It's a little bit of DEI. It's a little bit of general incompetence. It's a little bit of now, say, private insurance and corporate collusion. It's all of these things. And maybe this finally is like a rock bottom moment where people will reassess things.
Yeah, look, and it's a whole lot of Democrat arrogance and obstinance, right? I mean, just think about what Elon was saying with the smelt. For like 3.5 billion years, fish have found the right salinity in brackish water to live. But 50 years ago, a bunch of Democrats thought they knew better than nature itself. And so the things they do just defy logic. And for the party of science, remember during COVID, they were the party of science and we were anti-science. For the party of science, they really do ignore all the science and do things that everybody, like a 7-year-old with common sense, knows are going to have disastrous consequences. But I think that post was really on point, especially the last paragraph. Did hiring quotas lead to this? Partially. What really led to this? You know, you're a firefighter. I put up a post earlier on X saying, imagine being that paraphrase. Imagine being that firefighter. You're standing in what you literally think hell looks like. You screw that hose onto the hydrant, you turn the wrench and no water comes out. I mean, what are you feeling at that moment? And that problem rests squarely on the shoulders of Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass, and those DEI chiefs, because those DEI chiefs should be on the phone with the mayor and the governor once a month demanding that their preparedness is at the highest level. But of course, they won't do that, right? They got appointed by these people and they're going to shut their mouths and play ball. And so I think you really do have to put DEI in the spotlight here. Did it start the fire? No. Did it lead to the losses we're going to see and the eventual loss of life when those tallies come in? Absolutely.
Karol, is part of the problem here that things get bad slowly and then suddenly very quickly? So, you know, all of us having lived in New York, when every time we talk about this all the time, when we go back, it's like each time it's incrementally worse. And now people literally, when they're going to the subway, all stand against the wall, or you don't go down that certain block because, you know, they're selling drugs on it or whatever it might be. That Cali is dealing with a version of that, which is like, oh yeah, 10 years ago, I did used to walk down Melrose in West Hollywood, but now we'll just walk on that other side street, because it doesn't just magically happen overnight until literally fire destroys a neighborhood like that.
Yeah, I was going to say that it really does move very slowly and then very, very quickly. And that's how collapse of societies happen. That's how different governments fail. This is literally what happens. I know it's kind of crass to blame Californians for this because they're surviving this right now and they're living through this. And I have all the sympathy for them. But it's been a long time of bad policies in that state. And they had so many opportunities to vote themselves out of it. I know that the Larry Elder loss in the recall was one of the reasons you moved to Florida. I think that they had a long time of being able to look at these politicians and say, these policies are not functioning. And, you know, the thing is, I also do feel sorry for them in a way, because I've never lived anywhere where things function before. Florida is my first example of living somewhere normal. I lived in New York. I went to college in Boston. I lived in Europe, but nothing ever works in any of those places. But in Florida, when something is wrong, someone is there to fix it. And that's so unusual. And you don't know what that's like until you're living in it. But so my message to Californians is vote differently next time, but also know that there is a world where your governor is not walking around shrugging his shoulders. You don't have to wonder whether there's water in the fire hydrants. You know things are going to get done, and really try to move in that direction as you move forward as a state.
I think I told you guys this story, but the night of the DeSantis reelection, I was there and we were broadcasting. And during one of the breaks, some random guy came up to me and he said, "Hey, Dave, how you doing?" And he's like, "You'll love this story." He was an engineer in Southwest Florida in Fort Myers. And he said he was an electrical engineer. And he said that, 3 days after the hurricane, when the Sanibel Bridge was completely destroyed, the causeway, he said DeSantis got like 50 of us together. He brought us out there on the edge of the water and basically said, "What do you need?" And they built that bridge basically in a matter of weeks when it would have taken the federal government months. And it's like, yeah, that's basically why we're all here. We're going to do a complete topic shift and talk a little bit about terrorism. That's hilarious in just a second. But first, Rumble Premium. As you guys know, the war against free speech is in full swing. Rumble, a leader in defending this fundamental human right, has taken a bold stand. Recently, they joined forces with X to sue a cartel of advertisers and ad agencies who conspired to block ad revenue from platforms like Rumble. Even Dunkin' Donuts refused to advertise on Rumble, citing so-called right-wing culture. To push back and rally support, Rumble has launched Rumble Premium, an ad viewing experience packed with perks for both viewers and creators. By upgrading to Rumble Premium, you're not just enhancing your experience, you're actively supporting the fight for free speech. Now's the time to join the movement. Rumble's offering $10 off when you purchase an annual subscription. Just go to rumble.com/premium/Rubin and use promo code Rubin. Like I said, if you have the means and believe in the cause, now's the time to act. And if you don't, we're just grateful to have you watching us right here on Rumble. There was a massive, horrific jihadist terrorist attack less than 10 days ago, and it seems like it's long in the past. Let's just recap it for you real quick from the Daily Wire. The FBI said at press conference Thursday that there are no additional suspects in the Islamic terrorist attack on the New Orleans French Quarter, following reports that indicated that there were at least 4 others. FBI Deputy Assistant Director Christopher Reyes said at the press conference that 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, a U.S. citizen who had converted to Islam, pledged allegiance to ISIS before the summer, according to videos obtained by law enforcement. Jabbar killed at least 14 people during the attack and wounded dozens more when he mowed down his victims with a truck that he rented. He then got out and opened fire with a rifle before being shot and killed by the public. Of course, the other thing that happened was the Cybertruck attack outside Trump International in Vegas. Guys, the reason I wanted to cover this, it almost seems like it's just like long history and why even talk about it, but that's exactly why I wanted to bring it up. That we had a major jihadist terrorist attack that killed 14 people. I mean, it seems like we should all know their names. Why didn't Joe Biden say any of their names? By the way, one of them happened to be a Palestinian. The first girl that was killed was black. You would think we would care about these people. Alas, we just move on, John.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. Let's look at this from a law enforcement lens, through a law enforcement lens, and a law enforcement public information lens. First of all, they started disseminating information, the FBI, with the ASAC, the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the office, the woman Althea Duncan. Mm-hmm. Well, she completely botched it by saying it wasn't terrorism. And so we got a glimpse of her boss, a guy named Lionel Murthel, who's the SAC, the special agent in charge over in New Orleans, and that the New Orleans field office. Well, this is real interesting, right? Because now it gets kicked up to headquarters, which is the swampiest part of the swamp. You've got what they call an ADIC, an assistant director in charge now. And notice the way he worded this and the way he phrased this. He didn't say there were not operational cells active in the United States. He said in that particular attack, there are no further suspects. Right. And to me, that's very telling, because all of the intel, I have a lot of sources in the special operations and intelligence community and in law enforcement, obviously, to a person, to a man and woman, they've told me there are active cells operational in the United States, and a lot of them. I am sickened by how the FBI went overboard and worked overtime to cover this up. The American people have a right to know. So I'm at a point where I don't trust anything the FBI says, and I read between every line when I see these statements.
Yeah, and by the way, that line, what's her name again, the agent who said that this wasn't a terrorist attack?
Althea Duncan. She was the
when I saw that, and it was within hours of saying it, it's like, how the hell would you know that at this point? Wouldn't you say at the very least, if you were competent, you would say we don't know? It's not just that she turned out to be wrong. It was going out of her way, basically, to lie. Carol, let me...
Dave, can I add one thing? Not only did she lie, but she lied egregiously, because she knew in her custody in her evidence, a chain of evidence. She had the ISIS flag.
Right, they already had it. Yeah,
they had it. FBI forensics had already processed the ISIS flag. That was one of the most egregious lies I've ever seen told to the American public.
Karol, let me take a different angle on this with you, which is, so we got about 10 or so days till we get Trump. Obviously, there's going to be major changes at the top and across the institutions, but are you hopeful that Trump will be able to deal with this stuff properly and deal with the border properly and really, to John's point, deal with the, say, cells, and we don't know how many people on top of forget terrorists and jihadists, gang members and everything else that are here?
So I am somewhat optimistic about changes that he can make. I think that they're going to be a lot harder than people imagine. I actually broke the name and the story of the New Orleans, car rammer. And the only reason that I mentioned that is because there were a lot of people on the right who were convinced it was going to be an illegal immigrant or whatever. There's a lot of different problems that we have right now. And if we focus all of our attention on, say, the border, we're going to miss the fact that there are homegrown terrorists like this guy. So I feel like look, I was in Montevideo a few weeks ago, and I wanted to go see an old synagogue in the city. And we got to the block, and right away I knew which building was the synagogue. How did I know? It had concrete blocks outside of it. Americans need to understand that we have a new way of living, and we should have had this new way of living basically since 9/11. You can't have, for example, New Year's Eve events like this and not have concrete blocks. And Americans will say, "Oh, I don't want to live that way." Well, I'm sorry, that way has come to us. We didn't want to live this way, but that life has come to us in so many different ways. We've allowed, bad ideologies to fester, for example. And so if we're not going to stop that, then we need to be proactive in having defensive measures in place. We need to have a completely different way of kind of surviving in our everyday lives and protecting ourselves. Group events, for example, need to have more protection. I think the New Orleans New Year's Eve party was extremely unprotected. It was a dangerous target the whole time. And we need to really learn lessons from this. It can't just be the border. Of course, I want Donald Trump to do a lot on the border. I want him to have mass deportations of criminals and people who have entered illegally. I want all of that. But we need to see that that's not the only problem here. And there's going to be a lot of other issues we need to fix. And we should make the small changes that we can make, like cement blocks, like locking school doors, that kind of thing. We should make those changes up front and work on the rest later.
Right. I agree. And of course, we can connect this just like we could connect the fire, not fully blame the fire on DEI, but we can connect this terrorist attack also to DEI. Check out this tweet from Robbie Starbuck. 6 months ago, the New Orleans FBI office was doing DEI hiring events. Maybe they should have been more focused on hiring the best people who are good at catching terrorists instead. Hiring solely to increase diversity is a threat to national security for everyone. DEI must end. And then here's the statement from the FBI New Orleans. FBI New Orleans is holding a diversity agent recruiting event, and we want to meet you. Agents and FBI executives will provide firsthand information about a rewarding career. Apply now to see if you qualify for the July 17th event in Metairie, Louisiana here. I mean, John, you already illustrated the point with the NYPD, but it's everywhere. It is everywhere. And I guess, again, maybe we're finally getting to the final boss with all of it.
Yeah. Well, let me say this. I mean, one thing I will say, you can't place all the blame on the FBI here, because one of the things that keeps me up at night, having studied terrorism and cells in the U.S. and homegrown actors, are these low-tech asymmetrical attacks. What that guy did on Bourbon Street didn't require planning, didn't require chatter. In fact, he could have radicalized at his mosque at home, not really interfaced with anybody, and still pulled that off. But here's where we have to go back to identity politics. I spoke to a captain in the Louisiana Troopers. So Bourbon Street, to Carol's point, has those hydraulic steel barriers, right? Like they have outside the White House. Well, they were down for repair, and the city promised New Orleans PD and Louisiana State Police they would be fixed by the Sugar Bowl / New Year's Eve, and definitely would be fixed by the Super Bowl. Well, they just abandoned it. They made these promises. They fell, and then they forgot about it. The cops, both agencies, were screaming and yelling to get these things fixed before New Year's Eve, and the mayor, the administration in the city of New Orleans and the parish completely dropped the ball. And so I don't know if the FBI could have interdicted this because of how low profile and how little planning it took. I think the blame for this one falls more on the city of New Orleans and the parish for not fixing those barriers, because had they, that guy would have never been able to make the turn. If you see the video, there was a New Orleans PD.
Oh, yeah.
His car, he went up on the
We'll
sidewalk.
lay in the video right now.
Yep. He went up on the sidewalk, and had those barriers been in place, this wouldn't have happened. This one is really tragic.
Yeah, Carol, I'll give you last word on this, and then we'll jump to some sillier stuff like invading Greenland.
Well, I think that our vision for the country needs to be making changes that we can make quickly and kind of thinking ahead on the bigger picture things and doing those along the way. Any changes that Trump can implement day one in office, he should go ahead and do those. And I think that he should use the federal government in a lot of different ways that he didn't get to the first round. I'm sure he's had 4 years to think over what he'd like to do. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what those things are. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I would love to see this country turn itself around.
And one of them might be annexing Canada. We'll have more on that in just a sec. It's time to make mornings great again. If your coffee isn't fueling your fight for health and freedom, it's time for an upgrade. 1775's Vitality Coffee isn't just coffee, it's brain fuel for patriots. Packed with lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, chaga, and turkey tail mushrooms, this coffee doesn't just wake you up, it keeps you sharp and ready for anything. Lion's mane and reishi boost focus, cordyceps deliver clean, crash-free energy, and our hand-picked Bolivian beans pack a bold flavor corporate coffee can't compete with. No fillers, no woke nonsense, just coffee that works as hard as you do. Proudly backed by Rumble, this coffee isn't for conformists. It's coffee for the bold, the free, and the rebellious. Head over to 1775coffee.com and use code Rubin for 15% off. Make mornings great again with coffee that stands for bold flavor, uncompromising quality, and the freedom Rumble champions every day. All right, so yeah, Canada, Panama Canal, Greenland, they all might be ours. Here's the Orange Man.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada.
To Greenland and the Panama Canal, so forth. Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
I love the no there. Listen, putting aside whether you think we should take over Canada or we should grab the Panama Canal back or be defending Greenland or any of this stuff, just like all of these idiotic questions when they ask him things. Are you going to attack Iran? You think I'm going to tell you that, you MFer? Like, there's something at least refreshing about that regardless of the policy. I think we all agree on that, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if we all agree on taking over Canada. I just don't know that I want to live in the same country as Justin Trudeau. So I'm just, Carol, what do you think about that?
I am fully opposed to taking over Canada. Why would we want a bunch of libs in some like Arctic wasteland? Like, if we're going to take something over, like Turks and Caicos, I mean,
that would be
let's
nice.
like be smart here. What do we need Greenland for? I have a list of places we should take over before we take over these frozen, wastelands.
Yeah, let's snag Bora Bora from the French. They shouldn't be there anyway. John, what do you want? Should we want Turks and Caicos and Bora Bora?
I'm with Carol on this one. I mean, Canada is a socialized nation with 40 million people on socialized healthcare. Who's going to pay for that? Greenland, same thing. All right, 56,000 people. There aren't too many. So it's culturally, people in Canada, people in America say, well, we got to take over Canada. They're kicking out Trudeau. I'm like, yeah, but their conservatives are not our, brand of conservative. They're still anti-gun. They're still pro-socialized healthcare. Yeah. And Canada's been launching a shadow war on us. And I'm going to show you some proof of it. I bought this at a farmer's market. Can you see it? That was like $10. That's Canadian maple syrup. That was like $10. Okay. No,
that's a small,
I'm not going to.
What are you going to do with that small amount of syrup? That's barely enough for one pancake.
I'm going to save it. Right. I'm going to have anxiety if I put this on a Belgian waffle. It's not going to be enough. That's exactly my point. So no, I don't want to take over Canada. I don't want to absorb 40 million socialists. I don't want to take over Greenland. I don't want to absorb healthcare for 40 million, 56,000 people. These are preposterous proposals that I don't think are ever going to happen. Greenland truly has trillions in resources. Why would the Danes ever sell that to us? And if they do, it's certainly not going to be for a number we can afford.
I think it's also worth mentioning. Like, I don't think Donald Trump actually wants to make Canada part of the United States. I think it's just sort of his bravado of just like, hey, Canada, you better start playing ball with us so that John Cardillo's little thing of maple syrup isn't so expensive, and the trade better be a little more equitable, et cetera, et cetera. I thought this video was just kind of funny. Don Jr. saw this whole thing about Greenland, so he hopped on a plane and he went there and he arrived, and the people were quite happy with him.
Hey, very nice. What?
Guys, we're here in Nook, Greenland. The founder, 1721. That yellow house with the red top, that was his original spot. It's where he moved. This is where it all started out here. Just incredible scenery.
You know, I don't think we're taking Greenland, but I don't think we're taking Canada, but I do kind of think we're taking Greenland. Like, it just seems to me that Junior knew what he was doing there. And Carol?
I mean, he was greeted as a liberator. So right there, maybe we should rethink this. Again, do you see how cold he is? Why would we need this? Why do we need another cold location? Again, look to the islands. Look to Australia. Why wouldn't we take Australia? These people were sort of normal right-leaning people, and for the last 10 years, they've been moved steadily to the left. I think we could recapture sanity. They have a beautiful, a continent/country that we should take.
I want to show you this tweet. It's just from a random account, but I thought it summed up the part of this story that I like. I'm not talking about annexing Canada literally, but check this out. It's from an account called Lucerne Bolvin. The king's firstborn surveys a feudal holding prior to its annexation. We're seeing things that haven't been done in over a century. And for those of you that are listening on the audio podcast, it's a picture of Don Jr. at that Greenland airport. But the point being that Trump just sort of imagines things. He just puts things out there, and then it actually does change reality. Like, we've had 4 years of a guy whose mind has been muddled, and there's been no dreaming in America. So I'm not saying we should take these things or not. Let's just put that aside for a second. But the idea that we can kind of dream again, and you know what, since we're showing things, our friend Ben Shapiro wrote this: elections have consequences, and it's got the 51st state as Canada over there, Trumpland, which is Greenland, the Gulf of America instead of the Gulf of Mexico, the anti-European moat, which that would, of course, be the Atlantic Ocean. Like, it's all being kind of silly, but there is some underlying truth to it, right, John? That America maybe is going to reestablish its dominance as a world power. Doesn't mean take over every nation, but like, oh, we're going to affect the world again, potentially in a positive way. That seems good to me.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a restoration of American pride, right? We can joke about the actual end results of these policies, if they'll happen or not. But I think it's great for the American psyche. It's great for American pride. I just feel bad for Greenland once Trump figures out how much hotter the women in Iceland are. I mean, he'll institute prima nocta day one, Poor Greenland has no idea what's coming. But no, look, it's great for our psyche. It's great for American pride. It's great. One of the things we've really lost sight of is the concept of American exceptionalism. Yes. We've been told how horrible we are for so long. So I think if Trump accomplishes nothing else but restores some semblance of that, it's a win. I mean, it's a win.
Yeah, I totally agree, Carol.
Yeah, I have to agree as well. I just think, again, we should dream bigger. Why limit ourselves to these frozen tundras? Dream bigger, take better locations, some warm ones. Sure, why not? I completely agree with John, though. I think this is a moment for American exceptionalism to return more seriously, and that we should be more prideful of our country. We have a really great thing going. Nobody else has got what we've got. Greatest country in the history of the world, and we should act like it.
I just love the fact that he can just change so many people on a dime. I suppose there's a danger there too, but that the America First sort of isolationist people are suddenly like, yes, it's Gulf of America. Yes, we're taking Canada. Yes, we're taking Greenland, etc. Guys, that is our show for today. In that it is quite chilly in Florida. What do two Floridians like you guys? John, you've been here the longest. I'll let you go first. You got here, about 20 years ago?
February will be 21, yeah.
Wow, 21 years ago. What do you do in this frigid, it could be in the 50s this weekend. What are you going to do?
You know what, though? What you guys don't remember is 2006 and 2007, it was like in the 20s for a week and a half in January at night. It was absolutely frigid. There was frost all over the place. I kind of like it. We had a real hot summer. I mean, you guys know that. We had a real hot, real humid, and very long summer. So I'm enjoying this after being here 21 years. It feels pretty good to me.
So what are you going to do? You're going to jump on the horses and shoot some guns. I know you.
I'm actually, this weekend we're going out. We're doing a clay shoot this weekend. So that's going to be a long one outside. I'll take my horses out. I'm seeing you guys. getting together with you guys for happy hour. So win-win for everybody. The nice, cool weather.
Carol, what are you doing this weekend?
Well, it's actually going to be high of 78 on Saturday, so we're going to live again.
It's
Thanks
like
for
when
bursting my
We're going to go to the beach because that's what we do when it's a high of 78. Yeah, I have 26 kids, so I'm going to be shuffling them around to their various activities, robotics, history competitions, and, all kinds of sports. So that'll be my weekend. I will be very warmly bundled up, but I won't be as warmly bundled up as a lot of the Floridian women I see in like puffer coats and Ugg boots. I mean, ladies, you're doing too much. A sweatshirt, a nice sweatshirt. That's what we're looking for here.
it's funny, it's going to go from like 60 to 78, and then we're all going to be like, how many days of complete darkness do they have in Alaska? And then it finally get a little light, and everybody comes out. We're all going to be coming out of the little huts and everything. I've enjoyed this as always with you fine people. We'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Guys, it's Friday, so no post-game show. But tomorrow, my interview with Stephen A. Smith will be up across platforms, and I am sure you will dig it. We will see you on Monday.